on trial before the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. When morning came, the chief priests met in the council with all the Jewish leaders. They bound Jesus, led him away, and turned him over to the Roman governor. After hearing them, the Roman governor Pontius Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. The chief priests went on to accuse Jesus of many things, but Jesus simply stood quiet. Pilate then asked Jesus, "Do you have anything to say? How do you respond to all these charges that have been made against you?" But Jesus said nothing more, and Pilate was astonished. Now it was his custom at that feast that Pilate should release one prisoner from custody, whomever the people most desired. There was one rebel from those imprisoned for insurrection against the Roman occupation. He had committed murder during an uprising. His name was Barabbas. A crowd had gathered in front of Pilate's judgment seat to request that Pilate follow his usual custom. Pilate turned to them and said, "Why don't I release to you the King of the Jews?" He knew that the chief priests had delivered Jesus because they were threatened by him, not because Jesus was a criminal. But priests moved among the crowd and persuaded them to call for Barabbas instead. Pilate then asked aloud, "Then what do you want me to do with the King of the Jews?" The crowd responded loudly, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" But now Pilate yelled to them, "Why? What has he done to deserve such a sentence?" And the crowd shouted even louder, "Crucify! Crucify! Crucify!" Beaten, tortured, and mocked. When Pilate saw that he could not persuade the crowd to change its mind, he released Barabbas to them and had Jesus publicly flogged, which was the normal prelude to crucifixion. Then he had Jesus led away to be crucified. The soldiers took him into the headquarters of the governor. And the rest of the soldiers and the detachment gathered there, hundreds of them, and they surrounded him. They put a purple robe on him and made a crown of thorns that they forced onto his head. They began to cry out in mock salute, "Hail to the King of the Jews!" For a long while they beat him on the head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down as if to honor him. "Hail the King of the Jews!" Again, Isaiah chapter 53. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Would you bow your heads with me? Jesus was taken into the halls of power, the Roman Empire, the most dominant, oppressive superpower the world has ever seen. And Pontius Pilate wasn't a fickle man, he was ruthless. There are stories in history of Pilate just wiping out every single suspected rebel, suspected uprisings among the Jews. Pilate just wiped them out. He was brutal. But here, Pilate knows that Jesus is innocent. And yet he gets to a point where he just says, fine, do it. There was a place called the Praetorium that was right next to the Jewish temple. This was what was called the headquarters of the government, of the governor. And it was a reminder to all the Jews, if you ever get out of line, we're right here, the force of the empire. And the soldiers dragged Jesus into the headquarters, and an entire detachment was there, hundreds of them. And you can imagine Jesus by himself, already surrounded, already beaten. And they put a purple robe on him, and they forced this crown on his head. And they begin to cry out in mock salute, hundreds of them, "Hail to the King of the Jews." Hundreds of soldiers surrounding Jesus as he stands by himself. And they beat him. And they spit on him. And they kneel down as if to honor him. He's just another victim for them to torture and play with. Lord Jesus, the utter humiliation that you endured, the beating, the flogging, the utter loneliness, and what blows my mind is that at any moment you had even told Peter, I could call down the power of God, legions of angels, and they would fight for me. And this would be over in a heartbeat. But you refused to do that. because you had fully surrendered to the will of God, and this was where it was supposed to go. So, Jesus, you endured it for us, and we are so grateful. And so we continue this journey with you, knowing that it was us that you carried in your heart as you journeyed to the cross, so that we could be free, so that our sin could be paid for. God, give us grace and peace as we continue this journey with you.